Hello and welcome to another Tippling Philosopher video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. And I'm particularly excited to be joined today by a fellow Only Sky contributor, Hemant Mehta, who you might know from Friendly Atheist and from his own YouTube channel and from books and from lots of fingers and lots of pies. But just before I introduce my guest, I want to say thank you, first of all, to the early adopters. I've just created a membership for this channel, and I have four members so far. So if you see anyone with a funky little icon next to their name, that's awesome. They are members. Please feel free to join this channel. It's hugely appreciated. So far, Chindi Chimbalo, Sobek Lord of the Four Corners, Sabra Berzevicht, and James Apperson have joined, and I really deeply appreciate that. So if you feel that's something you want, there's a few perks in there, but genuinely you'll be helping me to create content and stuff that you will no doubt, well, I hope you'll enjoy. Speaking of enjoying content, tonight, or depending on where you are in the world and when you're listening to this, I have Hemant Mehta, who you, as I said, will know from various projects that he has going on. And here he is. Hemant, thank you so much for coming to join me tonight.
Hey, Jonathan. Hey, everyone who's watching. Nice to see you.
Excellent stuff. So you are presently contributing to Only Sky, and we'll talk about that a little bit later with a bit more sort of in a bit more of an explicit way. But you know, you have long been known to write and blog, and we wrote together at Patheos, nonreligious, and you do lots of other things. Do you want to give a sort of a really brief outline, because I know a lot of people already know all this?
Sure.
Do you want to give a brief outline to the kind of things you do?
Yeah. So I write at Only Sky. Those are usually longer articles about things that are happening in the news. If you're on YouTube right now, please go to my channel at some point in another tab, Friendly Atheist. Just search for it in YouTube and you'll find me there. So I've been making a lot of videos on there. There's also a podcast, Friendly Atheist Podcast, for anyone interested in that. So there's a bunch of things, but those are kind of lately, those have been kind of the primary things I've been doing.
Excellent stuff, and you seem to have a lot of love for you.
Thank you.
So I want to, and I know you've probably done this a million times, but tough luck. What's your journey into atheism in your, you know, what was your sort of family background? I know your family were Jains,
yeah,
which is a really interesting scenario, because I think there might be a difference to how your journey was to how many, say, American Christians who would maybe have a very different kind of pushback from coming out to their families as an atheist, whereas you Jains have a different worldview. Do you want to just very briefly, Wikipedia first paragraph, like lay out what Jainism is,
yeah,
and how you left that? What motivated you to become an atheist?
Sure. The thing about Jainism, the Wikipedia one sentence type of explanation, is it's a religion that's fundamentally based on nonviolence, which sounds great, right? So a lot of very vegetarian. You're not supposed to have evil thoughts, much less evil actions, which is why a lot of people are very much drawn to it. I don't know how true this is, but like growing up, you know, Mahatma Gandhi took a lot of principles from Jainism, because why wouldn't you? It sounds great. Sam Harris spoke positively about it in his book where he was trashing a lot of religions. I mean, so that's Jainism for you. It actually doesn't have a creator God. So in that sense, it's not like I technically lost a belief in God, because Jainism doesn't quite fit that mold. I will say, however, that growing up in a Jain family, I didn't know that. I grew up thinking God existed. I grew up in a culture, at least, that suggested God was real. And it was only later that I found out Jainism itself is kind of a non-theistic religion.
Yeah, it's known as transtheistic, which is that there isn't a creator God, and there's the universe is kind of, it's always existed, or some kind of like eternal thing. But I don't know an awful lot about it.
There are supernatural deities. There is a heaven and hell. Yeah, I mean, we can get into the weeds in there, but in general, I feel like my path out of religion was very similar to people who've left a traditional religion, which is when I finally started questioning it, where I was probably 14 or 15, when I finally started questioning my beliefs and why do I believe this stuff and what evidence is there? The answer was there is no evidence for it. It's just tradition, it's folklore passed down. Um, and in a sense of, I don't feel comfortable coming out as an atheist. I don't want to tell people, at least in my immediate family, I'm an atheist. So in that sense, very similar to the journeys I've heard from a lot of other people as well. Where it gets, I mean, the only difference, I think, and this is probably the important one, is that I don't feel I had a lot of baggage. So a lot of people, you might leave a Protestant Catholic religion, you end up carrying that with you, even as you are an atheist. I didn't have that because no one knew what a Jain was. So being an ex-Jain means nothing to anybody, which also meant when I'm critical of Christianity, I'm not coming at it from a perspective of someone who was traumatized by it in any meaningful way. And I think that helps. It kind of helps being an outsider criticizing that stuff. But I feel like my journey to atheism was pretty similar to a lot of other people's, you know, a lot of questioning, a lot of deconstruction, a lot of trying to figure out how to make sense of the world when you're not believing in a higher power or anything like that.
It was interesting that you've said before that one of the biggest pushbacks that your parents gave you were they were particularly worried that you weren't going to be a vegetarian. So the idea of Jainism, which is almost like this ultra consequentialism in terms of a moral value system. So it's like the idea is that you can take it as far as it will go technically, so you can end up, you know, starting to sweep the road in front of you so you don't step on mini beasts. And
that's one of those, like, if you're fundamentalist Jain or you're a monk or something, you don't want to hurt the germs in the air or the ants on the ground. In practice, I mean, you can even find varying degrees of how vegetarian are you among Jains. But I mean, the idea, the principle behind it is you shouldn't hurt anything. And in that sense, it's like, well, why wouldn't I want to believe that? And I think, I mean, my parents and I, we have a great relationship, but we almost just don't talk about that particular subject, the religion subject. But I think once they realize, like, I'm still vegetarian, I can justify that on ethical grounds, they kind of backed off of really arguing about it all the time.
So it's like, oh, Hemant, I mean, he's an atheist, but he's a vegetarian atheist, so you know, he's all right by us.
I mean, the question is, what do they value more, right? Is it the belief in God, or is it how you practice, how you live your daily life?
But there's something in that, right? Because this is a whole thing about works and faith in Christianity. So, for example, it's like, oh, he's an atheist, he's going to burn in hell. But surely there must be some degree. I mean, there doesn't seem to be enough of this, but Christians should go, well, he's a good atheist. He does good stuff. Right. And actually, he should, you know, if anyone's going to get to heaven, he's got the best chance out of all those horrible atheists. So there's something to be said for, like, evaluating someone on what they do.
Yeah. And honestly, that, like I said, knowing that I really didn't change as a person, between the Jain version of me when I was younger and now, it honestly made the process maybe a little easier for them to digest.
So what took you? So that you went to college, right? Is that right?
So I went to college, and at this point, I was out as an atheist, but I really didn't know any other atheists. But I was so drawn now to this idea that, like, it wasn't just reading books, because there really weren't any interesting books about atheism at the time, but I also wanted to meet other atheists. And long story short, I ended up meeting somebody who was also interested in starting a group on campus for atheists. She actually knew the landscape better than I did. She had volunteered at a place called Camp Quest, like the summer camp for atheist parents. I didn't know that existed. She knew about national organizations like the Secular Student Alliance and other groups that did work to help people who were becoming atheists. I didn't know that existed. All of this stuff sounded amazing. So we started a group, which was cool. You could have discussions on campus about religion, mostly with religious people as opposed to among atheists, but like cool. It was fine. It was interesting. But what was great is like after that year ended, I got heavily involved in those groups that she knew all those things about. And my involvement in like this world of organized atheism just kind of went from there.
So what drew you towards, I don't know whether you'd call it activism at the moment, at that moment, maybe you could, but what drew you, like, was it the social side of it? Just ending up at university thinking, hey, I want to like join a club or something, or did you feel, why did you feel so strongly about atheism, or did you feel so strongly about atheism at that time?
I think what was interesting about I was an intern at the Center for Inquiry, and I ended up joining the board of the Secular Student Alliance. Both groups CFI had a campus section that they were dedicated to. Secular Student Alliance focused primarily on college campuses, but both of them were all about helping people like me who were atheists or questioning their faith. And we wanted to help people have those discussions, feel comfortable in their skin. That was what drew me to the activism side of things, because it wasn't about arguing about God. It was about saying you're already an atheist. You don't realize there are so many other atheists out there. Let's try to connect you all. Let's try to form clubs on campuses. Let's try to have religious debates on campus, because as more people learn about this stuff and hear about it, they might be more interested in it.
So it's about normalizing it as well as giving everyone a voice and a feeling of a sense of community, which are things, oddly enough, this is what, I don't know, a couple of decades on, and that's exactly what you're still like fighting hard
in a way
achieve.
Yeah, and it's not that I necessarily needed it. I mean, it's not like I lacked friends at college. It's not like I didn't have a social circle on campus. But there was something really cool about, like, I knew my journey into atheism. It wasn't easy personally, but it's not like I suffered. It's not like I was kicked out of my house. It's not like I lost my friends or anything like that. But I did know that a lot of other people who were leaving their religion, it was a struggle for a lot of them. And the idea that I could help ease them into atheism or help them meet other people was just was such a cool opportunity that it's like, how could you not want to work with these organizations that are dedicated to making that happen? And I will say, like, even going to whether it was a board meeting or a conference with a student element, hearing someone talk about this stuff that I had only been thinking about, I feel like people take it for granted these days because of YouTube, because of stuff. But like, I think the first conference I ever went to, what the keynote speaker was Barry Lynn, who was running Americans United for Separation of Church and State. And at the time that I went there, one of the big issues, the big controversies on the church-state front was like creationism versus evolution. I knew about that fight. I wasn't oblivious to it, and I certainly had a position on it. But hearing him talk about it as an expert in the fight, because his group had been working on this issue, hearing him talk about it without apologizing for his position was just like, oh my God, yes, you get it. You understand it. It's so refreshing. And then hearing other atheists at that conference just talking about not believing in God, but not being so damn defensive about it. It's like, oh my God, that was awesome. It's not like I needed it, but man, that felt refreshing. And there was no other outlet at the time for that.
I guess that's an interesting time as well, because you wouldn't get that anymore. That feeling of excitement about being in a minority group. In a, like, it's almost like, I remember when atheism was cool. Do you know,
we're talking early 2000s. This is before the new atheism books, before YouTube existed. Podcasts are not a thing. Blogs are there, but like nascent. They don't really exist. So if you're talking about how do you find other atheists, how do you talk to other atheists, we're talking like shady chat rooms on like AOL. You're talking forums online, which are fine. Believe me, if you know how to navigate them, they're fine. But there's such a lack of information about this stuff. And now, I mean, this is the neat thing about what's going on today, which is no, there's a bunch of outlets for people to learn about this stuff and hear about this stuff. Now the question is, are you getting good information and useful information or not?
Yeah, it is. We're almost at a point where there's so much
Yeah.
information out there that presents its own problems, and in
Yeah,
fact,
but
people
so
can just cherry
going
pick what the hell they
going
like.
back 20 years ago though, it's like, oh my god, I'm hearing this stuff for the first time in a way that's so interesting to hear. And it's like, how could I not want to help bring this to
Hmm.
other people who surely would benefit from it if they just had the chance? And I got very lucky that people were very kind in the sense of, hey, you're a college student, do you need money to go to the conference? We'll give you a grant to cover that. Do you
Yeah,
need assistance to come to this board meeting so you could work on this stuff with us? They were willing to cover that. And like, I make sure if I have the opportunity, I give them donations to now. Like, I feel like that's a
yeah,
simple way to pay it
right.
back. But
So at the
like,
time, you were living in the halcyon days of early college atheism.
yeah. When it was, I mean, it has plenty of faults, had plenty of flaws, but for what I needed at the time, it was awesome.
Thank you so much to Ricky Johnson for taking on that and becoming a YouTube member. You're a legend, but one that actually exists. Um, so I know that you probably don't discuss this so much anymore because this is like been and done. It's kind of like, I guess where you might be is like, right, I don't bother arguing about atheism anymore. It's like, what do we do with it, and how,
Right.
and where do we go from now? But just please furnish with me with a little bit of time on this. What do you think is the strongest argument for atheism now, still after all these years? What do you think is the one that does the most damage to theism? And likewise, what do you think is the strongest argument for theism, if there is one?
You know what's interesting? I haven't thought about these questions in such a long time. And part of it is I have the luxury of not having to think about it because I don't
Yeah,
care anymore. In terms of the arguments, I mean, I think the simple answer in terms of like what's most convincing as an atheist is God's fingerprints appear to be nowhere. I mean, whether you're looking at the James Webb images that we just saw a couple weeks ago, it's like that has nothing to do. That's human discovery figuring that stuff out. Or you see all the bad stuff in the world. It's like if God has the power to fix this stuff, God's not touching it. Um, there's so many bad things God could fix if God had the power to do so. Doesn't happen. I think, I mean, I know that's 101, but like that seems like pretty basic reason to question God's existence. In terms of the arguments for religion, I mean, just we want hope. We want to believe things are going to get better. And no doubt that some people greatly benefit because they believe in God. They're inspired by God to do good things. I don't doubt that. I don't doubt they believe, but we can also see so many examples of believers who use that belief to do horrible things to a lot of other people.
I think it just. I've got to the point where probably like you, where you just look at every single argument I look at. There's just like, does this better support atheism? Any
Yeah.
data point at all, argument or data point, does this better support the hypothesis of naturalistic atheism or omnigod? I've just written
Yeah.
a book, as I keep banging on to everyone, 30 arguments against the existence of God, heaven, hell, Satan, and divine design. Right, just like every single data point supports naturalistic atheism, and there's
Right.
nothing that leaves me thinking, oh yeah, that one's in the ball court of theism.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the best arguments for theism are the gaps, the parts we don't understand yet. And it's like, if that's what you want to hinge everything on, go for it. But all
yeah.
right. And again, I mean, it seems like one of the most powerful ways I have personally found for uh getting people to change their views on these things is not doing the debate style, let's talk about the ontological argument or whatnot. It's just saying, here is a religious person doing something horrible. in the name of God, you defend it. Like,
Right.
I'm
So that's
putting this on
interesting.
you. You figure this out. Because the answer is always that person's not a real Christian. That person's not, it's very no true Scotsman-y.
Yeah.
It's like, but you can't say that for every single person who makes you look bad. At some point,
Especially when you've got an all-loving God an all-powerful God that could do something about it. I mean, you've kind of beat me to my next question. So my next question was going to be, what do you think the best way is to change someone's mind who is deeply religious?
I mean, look at all the horrible things that have happened when religious people, name the country, have power. I really enjoy how Phil Zuckerman, the sociologist, tends to put it, which is, what metric do you want to use here? Like ethics? If you want to measure ethics, no matter what metric you want to use, secular countries are the ones that are better off. Like women's rights, secular countries are the ones that are better off. Mortality, the average age lifespan of people, it's higher in secular. I mean, less violence happens in secular countries. Take your pick. There's no shortage on that front. Like, how are we better off because of someone's religion? And I mean, in the US anyway, we are, I mean, I feel like this is the same argument I said 20 years ago when I started getting involved in this stuff, but it's like, look what happens when religious people are in power and what they are doing with it. And it's never anything good. You know, we've seen what happens when conservative Christians, specifically in the US, get power, and it's using their power to hurt as many people as possible. That was true with George W. Bush when I got involved in this stuff. That's certainly true with the Trump administration. And it's true now with the Supreme Court.
But it seems like, and can I just say, props to Phil Zuckerman, who is a supreme sociologist of religion, whom I've interviewed on this channel. So please check out my interview of him, and we talk about two of his fantastic books on that. But you're absolutely right. But that brings me on to the kind of politics and atheism discussion here. So let's try and unpick a little bit. So why is it that atheists tend to be skewing to the left? Why do you think that is?
If you look at any of the issues we're talking about, I mean, take abortion rights or let's go simpler with less ambiguity here. Let's take LGBTQ rights, same-sex marriage, something as simple as that. There really isn't a good moral argument against why gay people shouldn't be allowed to be married if they want to be married. If you're looking for opposition, it's almost entirely religious in nature. Are there homophobes or atheists? Yeah, but like 3 of them. Same thing with abortion. Like, what are the arguments against giving a woman the right to choose? They're almost entirely religious in nature, like the idea of fetal personhood. The baby is a living person from the moment of conception. That's almost entirely a religious concept, certainly not a scientific one. And to be clear, are there religions that disagree and are pro-choice? Absolutely. Are there atheists who can make a secular argument for why abortion is wrong? Yes, there are. All of those people are in the minority here. The point is, if you're trying to make an argument against abortion, if you go to like a pro-life rally, it's going to be littered with Bibles and, religious signs and all of that. So pick your social issue. We are worse off because conservative religious groups have taken a position on them and they're always the wrong one. So what was your question again? Like, why do atheists tend to be left? Because on so many of those social issues, especially, the ethical side is the side of secular ethics. Like, the religious side is always on the one that hurts people. I mean, it happens all the time. Should we have universal health care in United States? Religious groups are the ones who tend to oppose that. So it's not that atheists can't be Republican, but trying to reconcile your secular values, whatever you want to say those are, with what the Republican Party is promoting. I mean, there's very little overlap between those two worlds.
I guess the more I have learned philosophy over the years, the more left that I have gone. I don't know whether that, I'm pretty sure there's causation there, which is to say that you start, there is, because actually I was previously fairly anti-immigration, and I didn't know why. I mean, I'm going back, decades now. I never quite knew why I was, and it turns out that, and you start doing philosophy, and I'm like, okay, I don't have any grounds for this. Like, it was complete luck that I was born here. I didn't merit being born in the UK. So what right do I have over the UK? What right do I have to say to someone else, you've got it tough over there, you can't come over here where I've got it good? Because it was just fortuitous that I was born here.
Yeah.
So, and then when you start unpicking these ideas, you start going, okay, I don't really have a rational basis for that. So therefore, that's psychological. It's come from my family, or it's come from my background somehow, my education, so as you start doing philosophy, you start dropping some of these ideas that are generally more kind of emotive and often right leaning. So I think as I've done more philosophy, I've both dropped God more and dropped a lot of and move towards the left.
And keep in mind, not to interrupt you there, sorry about that. Usually the sort of people who are capable of doing that critical thinking, where I want to learn more about these issues, I want to dive into the arguments of these different sides. If you're capable of doing that, it's almost the same of, if you live in populated areas, like urban cities, you tend to be more liberal because you're surrounded by people who do not share your background. You're going to live with them. You're going to work with them. It's very easy why would you want to hate the person you work next to? Like, you want them to be happy. Of course you do. As opposed to living in a bubble where, like, if you live in a rural part of the country where where the people around you, the schools you go to, are more or less identical to you, it's very easy to think this is what it means to be nationalistic. This is what a good person does. We all go to church. Church is a good thing. However, this is what I don't get about, like, the atheists who happen to be conservative. It's that when you ask, like, their news sources, the people they meet, they all tend to live in the same bubble. They all go to the same websites. They all rehash the same talking points. They are not looking at it's so weird to me that the conservative atheists, who are so good about saying, we should be critical thinkers when it comes to religion. Let's explore these different religions. Let's explore what the philosophers have said. And yet when it comes to political issues, they do none of that. It's just echoing these, like, right-wing talking points. I don't understand it.
So to put some flesh on what you're saying in terms of data, like for Brexit, which is largely underwritten by immigration, I don't care what people say. The places that were the most Brexit voting areas were actually the most rural, or had the least immigration. So in fact, where they were afraid of immigration because they hadn't actually confronted it, and there wasn't a normalization of people who of the out group, they voted much more in support of leaving the EU. So that's an interesting thing. And actually it's really interesting to see the rural urban divide in politics and things like that. There's a great book by Jason Stanley called How Fascism Works, which is a really lovely, easy read on 10 pillars of basically fascism, and one of those is like underwritten by this big rural urban divide, which then is used by people. And that's very much a case in America, where the Republicans have their strongholds in rural America, and the red and blue map is particularly favors that divide. I wrote a piece today for Only Sky on how Trump loyalism is really similar to God belief. And there was a really interesting Jordan Klepper interview. Jordan Klepper, The Tonight Show, went to
Daily Show.
Daily Show. I need to change that on the article. Actually, I typoed that. But Daily Show. And he went to a Trump rally, and he talked to them about January the 6th and showed them videos of January the 6th. So many of them hadn't seen any of the stuff. So there was this kind of inoculation. But then there was this cognitive dissonance of seeing this stuff, and then they invented conspiracy theories. And my piece was, and I'd like to know your thoughts on this. My piece was like, the mechanisms they were using. So theologians and an apologist keep God and the Bible up here, and the job of an apologist is to keep God up here,
right?
And there can be no way that God can come down, because so everything, they invent conspiracies, they do this, they whataboutery, all this kind of stuff keeps God up there. It's the same with Trump, and the same mechanisms were being used by Trump loyalists as apologists use.
Yeah.
And I thought there's a really big similarity there. I was wondering, whether you see a similarity between.
Yeah, I mean, why does God let babies die of cancer? It's horrific. Why would anyone in their right mind create that? And they will create justifications like, well, we can't, God is inexplicable. God works in mysterious ways. You're right. Like, they will come up with ways to keep God up there. What's amazing to me is that, I mean, I don't want to say let's give Trump credit for this, but he figured out that these people don't actually have any allegiance to God. What they like more than anything is being told how to think, being told like just there's someone up there who's going to take care of you. And if you can say that with confidence, like an evangelist on a Sunday morning, if you could say everything with confidence, then you can do no wrong. And any deviation from, worshiping this person up on high, any deviation from that is heresy. So it's not that they were drawn. Trump knew that for a lot of these religious people, yeah, some of them are true believers, but for a lot of these people, they don't actually care what's up there. What they're drawn to is being told how to think and what to do. And, they like being in the in group more than anything else. And you don't need God for that. You can replace it with some person. And Trump is like, all right, well, I'm that person now. So, yeah, if you want to say like, yeah, all the evidence shows he's a criminal, but it's like, no, they'll come up with reasons. Oh, he lost the election. No. That was, fraud or something. Okay, well, he committed a crime.
It was someone else. It was someone
else's.
else's. It was someone else's fault. In the same way you say God, God. In the same way you say, look at all this suffering and evil, and this tsunami or genocide. It's like that's humans' fault. It is original sin. That's humans' fault. With Trump, it's like it's Biden's fault. It's Clinton's fault.
Yeah. And what I wish would happen faster is like one thing that atheists as a group, as a very disorganized group, did for a couple of decades is that we convinced people that, listen, this thing that the religious people are telling you, the rationalizations they are giving you are BS, and you got to be able to look past it. And a lot of people did. Every survey you see shows more and more people leaving organized religion, right? They don't trust it as much. What has to happen now is the same thing has to happen with Donald Trump, where it's, I mean, you're seeing this with the January 6th committee too, but it's like, you guys, we're bringing on Republicans who are saying, listen, I was a true believer, but I'm telling you, I was there. It's not what it looks like. And I'm giving you my side of the story. Can they convince enough Republicans that, okay, listen, whatever your views are on politics, you don't need to trust this one guy?
I think there's a difference between Republicans and Trump loyalists. I mean, there was some work, another citation, MSNBC video, I think. It was an interview of someone who is in charge of analyzing Trump supporter focus groups.
Yeah.
And she said that basically what they found out is that they aren't ditching Trump, but what they are doing is saying, okay, strategically, Trump is probably not going to win if he was running in 2024 against that. We admit that an awful lot of people hate Trump. We love him, and we're still going to love him, but when we might not support him in a primary because actually someone else like DeSantis might actually have a better chance of beating the Democrats. So it's weird that they're not ditching Trump, but they might be strategically admitting he might not win.
Because what are they drawn to? They're drawn to this idea that if we can get in power again, then we can control everyone else. We can hurt the groups we want to hurt. DeSantis to them, who, by the way, in Florida functions the exact same way. You cross my path, I'm going to use it against you. These people are bad. Gay people are bad. Ironically, he has not taken a firm stance on abortion, because even he knows that's too divisive for him in Florida.
So which is a bit.
Florida has a 15-week ban, I believe, but he has not said let's go all the way to a complete ban, because even he seems to realize politically he'll lose a lot of moderates if he goes that far. It's weird. But the point is, like, yeah, there are people who are thinking strategically, because for all their love for Trump, they're like, we want the Supreme Court. How do we keep control over the Supreme Court? We got to have a Republican in power. So, like, yeah, they will play it strategically. But I mean, I'm amazed by the people who are like, who went to church all this time. Let me back up for a second. I'm fascinated by how many pastors who thought they were convincing all these people to believe in God realized far too late that these people are like mindless buffoons who believe Trump, and nothing you say about God or what God wants, or like, be kind to immigrants, let's help other people, whatever you thought the core of your faith was, they don't care about any of that, and they will believe any wild conspiracy theory, because that's what church is. It's a conspiracy theory a lot of people believe, and they just decided to go with a different one now. And these pastors are like, why do all these people not buy into the principles of our faith? They don't care. They never did.
Because Trump himself, of course, is an empty vessel. So he's had five different opinions on abortion. He's clearly not religious. I mean, he
doesn't think. I don't want to. I know you're not doing this on purpose. I hate it when people say he's not religious as if he's an atheist. No, he doesn't think about this stuff because he doesn't think. He just says what he thinks you want to hear. And some people genuinely believe that means he's like principled or whatever.
Yeah. He's his own God.
Yeah.
So, and I've spoke to you before when you had an open Q&A for Only Sky, but about the importance in America of single issue voters. So if you are like guns are your thing, Second Amendment's your thing, if you are religion's your thing, or if you are immigration's your thing, if abortion's your thing, right?
Yeah.
Like it seems that America's really big on single issues, and you will forgive in this almost always the GOP, you will forgive all these other policies that the GOP will have that will actually not be good for you. So if you're a working class white American, actually welfare is going to be screwed over. Your GOP is not your best friend. But if they're good on guns, they've got my vote.
That is almost exclusively a conservative thing, by the way. Like those they got the gun side, they got the abortion side, they got the anti-LGBTQ side, and they all lean in one direction. The problem with Democrats, for better or for worse, is it is such a big tent by definition that you can't afford to be a single issue person, because you're not going to win anything. You can get away with it in Republican,
which makes the message far more complex, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is
oh my god.
So it's so much more difficult to sell like an inclusive idea rather than scaring people with one thing.
And that's the frustrating thing about Joe Biden. He was absolutely not my like first, second, or third choice in any primary. But when election day comes around, it's like, well, all right, I got to go with him in order to get closer to what I want. And the thing is, and this is what's hard about him being able, we've seen it in the Senate, he can't get a lot done because the tent for Democrats is so wide as to include Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema
I mean,
and Bernie Sanders. And I mean, I think Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said this, like in any other country, Western country in the world, she and Joe Biden would be in completely different parties. But in the US, they are under the same tent. They have to be for political reasons because there's no viable third party yet. So that's it's a good thing in the sense that it's a big tent. We have to consider everybody. It's also really hard to get anything done though, because like if you go too far to one side, you risk alienating everybody else. Whereas for Republicans, they can go fully extreme on everything and still know they have captured the bulk of their party.
Yeah, you've nailed it. You've absolutely nailed it. And that to try and how do you fight that is difficult. It's tough. But I'm interested in what you said a little bit earlier, because this is fascinating psychologically speaking. So when we on the skeptical side, we're all about free thought, aren't we? We're all about like, we should be able to think for ourselves. You as children, we want to teach you to think for yourself. Other adults, come on, learn to think for yourself. Yet there's an awful lot of people who love to be told what to think, because actually not everyone is into that. Some people have got other things to do with their lives. It's just, you tell me what to think, and that's cool with me, because I'm going to go and shoot my guns, or I'm going to go and pray in church on a Sunday. If you're going to tell me what to think, then I get to keep this this social network going. So like how do we deal with a situation where actually there's a good deal of people who like the certainty of being told what to think?
I mean, I wish more pastors, more religious leaders would do more to convince their churches to think outside the box and not just spread the same message here and there. They don't have the courage. There's too many members. They won't be able to have a church any counting on them to do it right. But it is a hard thing. I mean, you want to say, like, when these kids get to school, in their better classes, they are taught how to think critically. Well, what are conservatives doing right now? They're trying to make it impossible for good teachers to enter the field. They're trying to destroy public schools in any way possible, because the last thing they want is for people to learn how to think critically, meet a more diverse group of friends, learn about each other. So that's a very real problem. But I mean, yes, it starts in the family in terms of teaching your kids to think critically and be open-minded. It happens at school. It happens with their friend groups. And part of it is just, you got to open yourself up. You got to be able to meet people who are not like you. And the thing about conservatives in general is they make it really hard for you to have a life outside of your bubble. I mean, this is both a good and bad thing about, like, some of the bigger religious groups in the world, which is that, I mean, I'll just take like a evangelical mega church in the United States. If you are a member of that church and you're like a devoted member of that church, it is so easy to have your entire social network be within the church, to volunteer through the church, to find a job because of a network built from the church. You don't have to hang out with anybody who isn't part of your group. That's not something, I mean, and one of the hard things as atheists is, like, you want to tell people, here's the argument against why here's the argument for why God doesn't exist. But they're not going to leave because of that, because look at all the ways the church takes over their life, not in a cult sort of way. They're not saying they're holding it over you or anything, but like, you have to convince people you can't just leave God. You got to leave your friend group. You're going to lose your networks and all of that. That's hard to do. It is really hard to break people from that system, and that system is really good at keeping you locked in.
Yeah, because not only do you have all those psychosocial, familial sort of networks and things to keep you tied in that are kind of almost emotionally bribing you to do so, but there are two things that I call mimetic fail-safes. So if you think of a meme as an idea that holds like a gene, if it's got some advantage for the people who hold to it, then a mimetic sort of a memeplex is like a network of memes, right? So a religion is a memeplex. So, you know, forget whether this idea is simplistically quite useful. I think some people don't like it, whatever. But it has what I call two mimetic fail-safes, which stop people leaving the religion, which is, if you don't believe, you're going to go to hell. And if you do believe, you're going to go to heaven. And there's no greater or worse thing in human conception than heaven and hell. You literally can't get anything better or worse, because otherwise that would be heaven and hell. And so therefore, you tag those onto those other things that are keeping you in that religion. And you've got really powerful reasons to maintain your belief.
Yeah. And I saw someone in the comments mentioned sports and nationalism and stuff, like, but that's the thing about sports. Like, I'm from Chicago. We have a basketball team. They suck. But I remember when the championships were going on, like a couple of months ago, it was not a big deal to watch those games and root for one team or another, because you could still enjoy what they were doing. And it is, I mean, listen, if there is someone who's like, I love this team and I'm obsessed with this team can do no wrong, I think most sports fans would agree that's pretty messed up. But if you watch Sports Center, you watch like sports reporters or writers or TV people, they might have their teams or players that they root for, but they are actively championing the game. They're rooting for like good play, good sportsmanship all around. You don't see that in the same way with religion as much.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
like,
this is actually a point I think is possibly more pertinent to the UK. So we've got historical ties, we've got historical issues with hooliganism in football, right?
right,
Soccer.
right.
And so actually nationalism and tribalism, like I come from near a place called Portsmouth, so everyone supports Portsmouth, but
Yeah.
Southampton is just down the road near a place, and it's got historical like animosity that's going on. And basically it's all about Portsmouth hate, Pompey hate Southampton, Southampton hate Portsmouth, and that's it. It's just visceral hatred that boils over into football, and so there is this nationalism and sports tribalism.
And when that descends into the hooliganism, like you're mentioning, of course, I mean, I would think, like, of course, everyone's like, "Come on, you people are being insane. It's a game. Calm down. I know it's important to us, but still." However, when it comes to like the World Cup and you have a national team, it's kind of nice. You have an entire team you can root for, and that unites people, and that's kind of nice. Religion does not have the same sort of thing in that regard. Um, I forgot where we were going with this
We
question.
weren't really going anywhere, but I just wanted to go back to, you were talking earlier on about Florida and Ron DeSantis and about abortion. Hasn't really. I don't know if you've seen a viral advert that's going on that's hit the airwaves just in the last day or so, put together by Mothers Against Greg Abbott. MAGA, Mothers Against Greg Abbott, so MAGA, and they've done an advert. I don't want to really describe it, but yeah, you've got to go and see on YouTube the MAGA advert against Greg Abbott in Texas on abortion. It is absolutely superb.
It is.
Anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in there.
Yeah.
So
and here's what's interesting, without giving away that particular thing, this is where I feel like a lot of people who were religious. One of the things that was defining is like sometimes you have these big issues that they've been taught to believe this whole time, like being gay is a total sin. And then you realize, like, as more people come out of the closet, as more people want to have just same basic rights as everyone else, a lot of religious people see that and they're like, why is that such a bad thing? There's nothing wrong with that. I feel like the conservative, like evangelicals, Catholics, the conservative Catholics, the ones who bet big on LGBTQ anything is wrong. It's a sin. You must avoid it. A lot of younger people who grew up in those churches saw what was going on, realized, oh, it's us. We're the problem here. And even if they didn't become atheists, they did not want to be a part of any church that perpetuated that kind of hate. I wonder if the complete extremism we are now seeing in the US on matters of abortion, even for people who grew up in a church and they were led to believe abortion is wrong in any circumstance, I wonder if a lot of those people are now going to distance themselves in the coming years from their church because they realize, oh, this actually hurts women when you put all these policies in place. Like, we are unfortunately going to see stories often of women painfully dying unnecessarily because they couldn't get the abortion access they needed. What is that going to do to a lot of women in church? A lot of people who go to church right now who have ethically been taught that abortion is wrong, but did not understand the nuance of that and are now going to see all these horrific stories happen. Is that going to pull them away from organized religion in the same way LGBTQ bigotry did, a decade or two ago? I wonder.
But you're going through this weird period of like democratic self-harm in the US, of like this really heinous backsliding, and this is set against a backdrop of a general liberalization of society and views. And so there's this kind of weird tension there. What is underwritten this? Is it a case that like an injured animal might fight harder as it's going through its like death throes? That it's like, oh, it backed into a corner and is fighting extra hard. Is that what's going on now? I mean, or is it just the rampant overrepresentation of religion in the institutions that matter?
Two versions of that. Like, yeah, I mean, you are seeing a smaller and smaller group of very homogenous conservative religious people, and they do have a lot of power, and now they're using it in any way they possibly can. So yes, that is part of it, where it's like, oh no, the demographics are shifting. We need to lock in anything we can. So let's go all the way on extremism. Let's try to stop trans people from existing as much as we can. They are going so extreme in as many ways as they can because the public is going in a very different direction. Now, the problem is they have rigged the system in a way so that it's really hard for the liberal majority to do anything about it. As a nation, that's really hard. And the existential question in the US right now is whether that liberal majority can sustain itself against this onslaught. So yeah, it's so weird that conservative views are dying off. They have been. Our society is getting more liberal, but the smaller and smaller group is very united in what they believe. Whereas the bigger liberal side of everything, it's such a big tent. There are so many different views. There are so many different issues that they are not united under one thing. And the question is like, come on, can we all agree on democracy? Can we all agree that like the Supreme Court shouldn't be able to have these things? And I mean, as we've seen, it's amazing. Like Democrats in the Senate, I've heard this criticism of Barack Obama. When he was in office for a very short window, he had 60 Democratic senators, 60, enough to override filibusters. And people are like, well, how come he didn't use that to do anything? Because those 60 were not united on pretty much anything.
And you guaranteed the GOP, had they been in that situation, would have been united. There's, as you said earlier, there's just this greater united feature to conservative politics.
Even Mitt Romney is probably the most liberal of the Republican senators, and he votes with Republicans in lockstep like all the time. But among Democrats right now, all the discussion lately is like, well, there's 2 Democratic senators who don't really vote with the rest of the party and don't do what they need to do. That is true. But when Barack Obama had 60, it was the same deal. You had like way more than 2 senators who were saying no to stuff. It was impossible to get those 60 to do anything because they were not all the same person. But this is the thing about the 2 parties. Like Democrats as a whole, it's kind of amazing that 48 Democrats seem to agree on just about everything now.
That's true. It's maybe that those 2 have ended up uniting the rest of the Democrats even more than maybe they would have done.
And a big part of the push for the November election is, listen, we just need 2 more sane people on the Democratic side to undo the damage those other 2 are doing, and we could at least get some stuff done. It's not going to be the same in the House, but like that's kind of the push for a lot of these senators.
Do you think, and this is an argument perhaps more for the Senate than the House because the House is a bit more funky, but do you think that what's happened in the Supreme Court with like 6.5 Catholic judges, as there are in the Supreme Court, which is like insanely disproportionate?
Yeah.
But do you think that what's happened has actually worked in the Democrats were going to get absolutely tonked in the midterms in November?
Theoretically,
almost certainly, I would have said if nothing else had happened. But now the Supreme Court rulings have happened that actually Democrats have got something to rally around and something
you would
to fight
hope
for.
And yet, Joe Biden isn't leading the charge, which is frustrating. So the question is, you're right. In any sane world, people would see what the Supreme Court is doing, use that as a rallying point. And there are some people doing that, but it's not coming from the top down. This has been a complaint forever, but it's like, how come the people who have the money and the power to put the messages across are not saying things like, all these other people are insane. You can't vote for any of them. They're crazy. Stop voting for them. Look at what they're doing on abortion. We need to protect it at all costs. You're not getting that message from the White House. You're not getting it from Joe Biden, who's like, I'm friends with some Republicans. Let's have bipartisan unity. It's like, I'm sure he thinks that sounds nice, but like, here's the question. What's more important? Is it trying to bring people together, which satisfies nobody, Or is it more important right now to say, screw those other people who are hurting you? Let's bring together the rest of us, including the people who don't think this matters but share our views, get them to vote. Stacey Abrams, who's running in Georgia, is very much on the side of, I do not care about the people in the middle, like those people who are like, well, I could go either way. She's not worried about them. She's trying to get Democrats who don't vote to come out to vote. That's where her focus is.
She's such a powerhouse of actual on the ground activism.
Yeah.
She's just absolutely amazing.
Yeah, she's great. I think Beto O'Rourke in Texas has a more of an uphill climb, but that's the same thing. He's like, I'm not worried about trying to get people in the middle. Let me try to get my side to come out. And maybe enough Republicans will be demoralized by Greg Abbott, or they will just not take it seriously if Trump is still out there. Maybe I'm not going to hold out hope they're going to vote for a Democrat, but maybe they'll.
There are more registered Democrats than Republicans, so mobilization
of your side. Yeah. And again, that's a hard thing for Democrats to do. I am amazed that the people who believe the earth is a few thousand years old and things like that, they are so wrong in so many obvious ways. You would think they can't even put their shoes on the right way. And yet when it comes to voting, they are so dedicated and motivated every single time. And yet our side, the side that has the academically gifted people by and large with formal degrees for whatever that's worth, we can't get our shit together ever.
Do you think that's a lot to do with anger? Like, because the right always, they're so much better at campaigning. So if we're going to talk about America, but it's actually broadly the same in the UK, the right always much better at campaigning. Because
they campaign on fear, and they're really good at it.
They campaign on fear, which gets people emotively like angry or fearful, which generates like mobilization.
Every election for the right is an existential issue. Like, we're voting for the Supreme Court. I don't care if you don't like Trump in 2016. Do you want Hillary Clinton picking Supreme Court justices or a Republican? And Donald Trump wisely said, you know what? I'm not going to pick them. I'm going to let conservatives do all the work of picking judges for me. And he did. He totally outsourced all the judge stuff to a group called the Federalist Society, who has, like, they know exactly who the conservative judges are. You don't have to say, are you going to vote to overturn Roe v. Wade? They wink, wink. They know exactly who those people are. Trump is really good about judges. He sucks at everything else.
Yeah,
but on that issue,
he was the most successful president in ever. Because
when it comes to that,
3 Supreme Court judges and down the legal system as well. Smaller courts.
And that's the thing, though. If you're a Christian pastor, it was very easy to say, we're not going to have a discussion about Trump. The election is not about him. The election is about, do you care about abortion? And they've made it so that that's the only issue that matters for those voters. It's like, well, if you care about it, this is who you vote for. You don't get another choice. Otherwise, their blood is on your hands or whatever. Democrats do not have the same fear. We don't, based on, we liked Obama because of hope. Like, that's a nice idea to rally around. But like, Republicans by and large are, if the other people win, your life is over, everyone's life is over, everything sucks. Whereas it's like, well, climate change is going to kill all of us. It would be very easy to motivate us based on fear and existential threats. But Democrats by and large do not do that. And then we lose.
I mean, it's so much easier to say immigrants are going to steal your jobs and do all this. Whereas, on the left, you're like, oh, immigration is a complex subject. So let's talk about this. But, there's going to be caveats here. And the right are like, yeah, they're all evil.
And remember, and unlike the left, the right has a propaganda network. They use the same talking points. They can live in a media bubble where you think you're getting news from like 100 different places, but it's really the same group saying the same stuff in lockstep.
Same company controls all the local media stations in America, or like 80%.
Sinclair owns a lot of local media stations, but like, you're going to hear the same thing on Fox News that you would on more conspiratorial networks. But like MSNBC, as people claim it's a liberal network, they are literally not getting talking points from the Democratic Party. And honestly, the people who watch that network would probably lose trust if they did. Like, that's the thing. There is no comparison between the two sides, because one side is very top down. We tell you how to think. You got to believe this. And the other side is doing all the actual work that you would want.
Bit of full circle there. Yeah, nice. Good link.
And it's
So,
frustrating.
Raskin for president.
Yeah.
But so the okay, let's stick on politics, but skew it towards non-religious here. So the non-religious have woeful representation in the Senate and the House.
Yeah.
Why is that? And what, even now in 2022, I don't think a single one openly calls themselves an atheist. They kind of euphemism dress it up with humanist, secular, blah blah blah, but no one actually openly says, yes, I'm an atheist.
So there's one House member, Jared Huffman, who is a open humanist. He would say atheist, but he's allowed to say, like, but the label I identify with is humanist. Fine, cool.
Yeah.
There are Jamie Raskin is another one. He's like a small h humanist, but on paper, he's Jewish, because that's the culture he identifies with. That's the religious upbringing he identifies with, but he's a secular Jew. Take that how you will. There are another like 20 or so Democrats who are just, I don't talk about my religion, so I'm not listed as anything, which, all right, fine, I don't care. That's your call. But here's the thing. In a lot of districts where Senate seats, especially where there are close races, you don't want anything that might be an easy way for the other side to trash you. So is it possible that there are a lot of senators who are not religious or atheists? Of course. But if they don't have to bring it up, why bother? You know what I mean?
What are there any GOP? What do you know of any GOP lawmakers who are at least close to being secular?
Zero. In Congress, the answer is zero. There is, as working with different groups, like with the American Humanist Association and whatnot, I have tried to keep track of who's running for state level offices and national offices, who's going to go to Congress, but also who's going to run for state legislatures. The answer is in Congress, in the House, in the Senate, not a single Republican elected or a candidate, as far as I could tell, is openly non-religious, no matter what.
I wonder if there was one, whether it would actually be beneficial for non-religious Democrats to vote for them, just to normalize that kind of say, look, you can get. I don't know.
It's an intriguing idea. It's a horrible idea, but it's an intriguing thought. There is one guy actually in Idaho right now who is running as a Republican for the state House, I believe. It might be the state Senate. He's running for that position. He won his primary. He is an atheist. He is a Republican. And basically the argument is he's a libertarian. He doesn't really buy into the social conservatism. But also, if you're in Idaho, depending on where you live, you almost are not going to get elected as a Democrat no matter what you do. So, of course, everyone grows up in like Republican circles. So he's like, well, yeah, I'm a Republican, but I don't buy into the conservative views. I'm watching him. I'm very curious what happens, because it looks on paper right now like he's going to get elected to the state House. He would be the only elected atheist Republican in the country at that level. And I'm very curious to see, like, are you actually gonna do what you say? You say you're on the side of like LGBTQ rights, that you do not want the government taking a stance on abortion, against abortion. That's one thing. You say that now. What's going to happen when you actually have to vote on this stuff?
That sounds like a sort of guide that you should actually, we in the media should actually like maybe herald a bit. Like, I don't agree with libertarianism. Right. I don't agree with your general position, but actually compared to your other Republican, party members in and around you, you are a much better version of republicanism.
In a state like Idaho, where it's entirely red, minus like a dot in Boise or something, you know what I mean? Like, in a state like that, where conservative Republicans dominate, you're right. Like, listen, I would still vote for the Democrat, but if this guy wins in the race compared to the other Republicans around him, yeah, I'm curious to see what happens. But I don't think, and this is kind of the argument that the conservative atheists, the four of them, have made, which is, wouldn't we be better off if there were atheists in the Republican Party? And the answer is no, because the Christians, conservative Christians who dominate the Republican Party, are never going to like listen to what the secular guy has to say. They're going to pass conservative Christian laws, whether or not you vote for it, because they don't care about your vote. They don't need you. They need you to vote for their judges. They need you to vote for their agenda. And like, they're not going to do any of the stuff you think they're going to do when you're like the libertarian atheist in the Republican Party. Interesting story. There was the only other recent elected Republican atheist in national life was a guy, I think, in New Hampshire. And as soon as I outed him as a Republican atheist, he did it openly. I asked him if he was okay with it. He said yes. He quickly then changed parties to independent. So he was the maybe Green Party. I don't remember. But like, he changed to a third party. And then when he ran for re-election, the Republican won. He didn't get reelected. I'm not going to take credit for that. I mean, he was going to probably do this stuff anyway. But the point is, like, they did not care about his, novel ideas. They cared about getting the numbers. And as soon as he became useless to them and they found another Republican who could take his spot, they went with him. Like, there are plenty of Republicans who could come out as atheists if they wanted to. They have safe Republican seats right now, but they won't, because they know if they come out as an atheist, it might lose them a primary in the future. Like, so the question is, what happens about people who are retiring? You're not running in a race again. Why don't you do it?
Yeah,
they haven't.
That would be interesting.
They
yeah.
haven't.
I
disagree with this comment that's on the screen right now. If atheist Democrats vote for liberal atheist Republicans, right there, that would change the game. Yeah, in theory, maybe. But who are these liberal atheist Republicans? Where? At what level? Because if you put a Republican in power, you are going to get Republican policies. What do you think's going to happen because there's a token atheist in the mix? Not
I guess
much.
That's a thought experiment, if anything. And this is the difference between the UK and the US. So 12 years ago, we had David Cameron as PM, and he was in coalition with the Liberal Democrats. So the Conservatives and Liberal Democrats, they're in coalition, and the Liberal Democrat leader was Nick Clegg, who was Deputy Prime Minister, and the opposition leader of Labour was Ed Miliband, right? And he had an interesting thing where you had three atheists.
Yeah.
In the three, so Ed Miliband was, his father was a Marxist and whatever, was a open atheist. Nick Clegg's an open atheist, and David Cameron said his religion came and went like the radio signal in the Chilterns, which is an area. In other words, it's a really polite way of saying, it comes and goes, but basically a polite way of saying, I'm not religious. And so none of them religious, but no one gave a shit in the UK.
Right. And that's the thing. Like, they got other things to deal with, and it's more acceptable. I think in certain parts of like Australia, granted, Scott Morrison was super religious, but that's the same thing. In Australia, they had a female atheist who was prime minister.
Julia Gillard.
And it just didn't really make a huge difference because it wasn't the thing she was known for. Whereas because it's such a novelty in the US, it would be seen as weird. People would make it a weird thing. I mean, Bernie Sanders, too. Bernie Sanders says he's religious. I don't care. But the fact that he comes out as a democratic socialist, it was a weird thing until he just openly embraced it, because it's not going to be used against him, because what's he running for? Like a seat for Senate in Vermont? Like, no one cares. So like, he could embrace that. And now guess what? Now you have other democratic socialists out there.
But he's almost made such an awesome image for himself, like with mittens and everything. Bernie Sanders is just a force of marketing in a sense, by being that.
He is himself. And like, what you're getting with him at all times. I love the guy. He's great. Will he be acceptable, though, if he were running for... I mean, this is what I feared in 2016 and in 2020, which is if he won the primary, like, I don't know how that's going to play if he's the candidate, because they could use any number of things against him to scare people.
I think there are people who have really their currency has gone up from the January the 6th hearings and all sorts of stuff. Again, Raskin, but there are some interesting choices for the Democrats. If a bit of homework for the viewers, if you want to see an amazing speech, go and see Julia Gillard, who is the atheist PM of Australia, when she did the speech in Parliament against Tony Abbott about misogyny. If you want to see one of the best speeches ever made, political speeches ever made, go and watch that. It will send shivers down your spine. It's absolutely brilliant. This leads me on to the next thing I was going to talk to you about, which is, well, what do we do about this? I'm British, so you don't care about me. So thank you, Jonathan Hemant. Love you guys. Thank you very much, Logan Fisher. It was really kind. And thank you for your super chat as well. Anyone got any super chats or questions, please get them in. It really does mean that I can continue doing this, and my partner doesn't mind that I'm actually not upstairs spending time with her and the family. So what do you think is the best thing a random person can do to help save our democracy from a theocracy?
One of the things when I'm writing articles about this stuff, I feel like my intended audience are religious people who are willing to listen to common sense. I'm not thinking I'm talking to atheists. I would hope that a lot of people who might believe in God would say, okay, but what this party is doing, what this religious group is doing is so indefensible that I got to be on the other side on this issue. I've actually been pleasantly surprised by how many atheist groups have been working with religious organizations when it comes to church-state separation issues lately. They will file lawsuits together or amicus briefs together saying, like, listen, they believe in God, we do not. However, we do not want to see someone else's religion used as a basis for this law, and we stand together in that. That's a wonderful thing to do. I want to see more pastors come out and say, listen, we are a Christian organization. That's why we should have more immigration. That's why we should have, socialized healthcare, however you want to put it. There is a way to do that. I don't think this is just let's go vote, though that should happen. And listen, if you're not politically active and engaged, you should be, and you should try to convince other people to be as well. But I think the biggest thing we need to do is convince that large group of people who are progressive religious people or apathetic about religion that none of us should want our lives and our government controlled by one religious organization that is hell-bent on imposing their will on all the rest of us. Like, doesn't matter what our differences are. I would hope we are all in agreement that that's a bad idea, and we all need to vote accordingly and publicly oppose it. Like, if you want to go on Facebook and trash this stuff, by all means, go for it. But talk to people in your life circle and make sure they know where you stand on this stuff, if that's an easy thing for you to do. If you have opinions, like, make sure they know about it. Because I promise you, like, I don't want to compare the movements. They're totally different. But one of the most powerful things, like the gay movement did, was just more people came out, and it's really hard to demonize an entire group of people when they're right next to you, when they are in your family. We know that from atheism too. Like, when you come out as someone who's non-religious, that has an effect on how your family perceives atheists and how your friends perceive atheists. But the same thing happens here. Even if we disagree on all this other stuff, hopefully you think what the Supreme Court did with abortion is so heinous and so awful that you should do anything you can to prevent that from happening, which means voting for Democrats in the Senate. I would hope that's something, I don't know if it'll save us, but I mean, the biggest thing we need to do is get unengaged people, apathetic people, to care about this shit the way we do, because that's the only way we can prevent this from happening. There's way more of us than there are of them, but they're organized.
Guess it's the apathetic. There's a lot of people who just won't vote. It was the same with Brexit. The biggest proportion of people that voted for Brexit, the biggest proportion of Brexit voters were the people that didn't vote. Like, and it's like, that's really frustrating, because actually in hindsight, a good deal of them might have regretted that.
Right.
so that's such a challenge. But I guess another challenge is that as we polarize more and more, and we sit in our, and actually maybe as we aren't even leaving our houses, as we're working from home more, we sit in our bubbles more. That actually we aren't going through that normalization process because we're just not getting out there. Like you're talking about going to church, or all my friends, and have no experience of these other belief systems, and that's just an added challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely hard. However, I know we're both unique in this sense that we have this luxury of having a platform where we could share our thoughts and maybe people are going to read us or watch us. That's a different story. But I mean, that's the thing. Everyone, just about everybody these days has some kind of platform that they use, whether it's Facebook or TikTok or whatever. And it's even if we're isolated physically, we are very much less isolated online. So again, whatever your social circle is, even if it's a virtual one, tell them what you're thinking. Tell them how you're doing, what your position is on this stuff. Because, like, I know it's different for me because everyone I'm in virtual communities with is very opinionated. But, like, for people who just use Facebook, for example, to share pictures of their kids or to talk about, like, a movie that they saw or whatever, it will have an impact if you make a post about how this abortion thing is hurting you personally, even if you're not personally impacted by it. Because I will tell you, it is such a big deal on my own personal Facebook feed when a former colleague of mine who never has any political thoughts, or someone who has only ever posted pictures of their family and doesn't use Facebook or anything else, when they come out and say that they're really troubled by what's going on, or that this decision or this bigotry is really hurting the people close to them, that carries weight. A lot more than it would if I said that stuff, because of course they expect it from me. But, like, that's the thing. When you share it, you're going to be surprised at how many people chime in and say, I'm feeling that same way. And when you say, like, listen, I don't beat you over the head with this stuff, but I had an abortion when I was younger. And this fact that these women can't get them anymore is really bothering me. And I hope that you will do what I do and vote for this candidate in the upcoming election. I hope you'll do that. And, like, if you put that out there and you're not the sort of person who typically does that, but it's heartfelt and it feels sincere, you're going to be surprised by how many people hear that and say, you know what? I wasn't thinking about it, but I will do that. Or I didn't know you went through that, and maybe I should have thought differently about it. Like, it's a scary thing to do, but it is so powerful when the people you wouldn't expect to say anything say something.
This is really interesting. So, like, I've got a Facebook account, right, my own personal one, and I've had an interesting life full of living in many places and having many jobs and doing lots of different things and fingers in many pies. So I've got actually quite a selection of people, whereas, like, as I become a bit more prominent in the community, I may get people now starting to follow me because they agree with what I already. But what I'm trying to say is there's an awful lot of people who don't necessarily agree with what I say because I've just collected them as friends and acquaintances over time. But I do get an awful lot of people that say, oh, thank you for saying the things you do, like personally sending me messages or saying, like, I'm really interested in what you have to say on this thing because I know that you think about these things a lot. And what I'm trying to say is,
and they trust you,
There's an awful lot of lurkers is kind of my point, which is that I've got an awful lot of friends and acquaintances that although I think, God, I'm sound so boring because I'm just bleating on about the same old crap over and over every day. Oh, guess what? I'm going to say some liberal lefty shite again. I get really angry against Trump. But actually, there's a good deal of people who actually take that on and listen, and they may never say anything. So I think, well, like, half my friends don't obviously give a crap, but actually, no, there are people.
They do. You know what's interesting? This is a story I've never told, like, and I don't want to say her name. I have a longtime friend, acquaintance. We don't hang out or anything, but I remember in, like, 2008 when Sarah Palin was a Republican vice presidential nominee, I was still writing about this stuff and talking about it and why I was troubled by her candidacy and the possibility she could become vice president. I remember getting a personal message from a friend who was deeply offended by the fact that I would go after, criticize her religion and things like that, and her religious views when it came to abortion and things like that. I don't remember how that ended. I just was like, sorry, whatever. Sorry, not sorry. Like, I'm still going to criticize it. But what's interesting is I have not talked to her about any of this stuff since then. But because we are Facebook friends, we lurk on each other's pages every now and then. And I remember hearing from her more recently saying something about, like, thank you for speaking out on this particular issue or something. And I don't know if her views have changed, if she used to be religious, and I don't know. We have not talked about that. But like, this is someone who had an opinion on stuff. And now, not only did she thank me for being outspoken about it, I have seen her be outspoken about it in her own way on her own page in a way I don't normally see. And again, that carries so much weight among the people who know her. Imagine if more people were doing that on issues that they felt really strongly about, but they felt very scared to go public with them because, you're not supposed to talk about these things in polite company or something.
So to use a biblical story here, the parable of like sowing the seeds, and sometimes the seeds fall on rocky ground and on the stones, and they don't do anything. But sometimes they hit that fertile ground, and it might take some time for that seed to germinate, but eventually it will. So I guess.
I have said this so many times, but it's like, I sometimes hear from people who send me nice messages. They've read my stuff over the years. They want to say something. That's awesome. That's really appreciated. By and large, if you look at people who have read my articles or people who watch these YouTube videos, there's a few people who are making comments in the thread right now. That's a handful of people. That's very nice. But there are many more who are actually watching this video right now who are not saying anything, right? And how many of them have opinions on this stuff? How many of them are just lurking because they want to learn about this stuff? They are interested in the conversation. There are so many more people who are passively watching this stuff, which is fine. You can absolutely be a lurker. I know it's not safe or easy for a lot of people to do the sort of thing we are doing right now. We have the luxury of doing that. But again, if some of those people, to go back to your thing about sowing the seeds, I don't care if they reach out to me and say, I changed my mind because of this, because I'm not keeping tabs on who becomes an atheist or who agrees with me or anything like that. I just hope that if something I'm saying, I hope it makes logical sense, that someone who's open-minded will consider it and think about it. And maybe over time, they will start to look at these issues the way you look at these issues, Jonathan, or I look at these issues. And it's not going to happen overnight, but maybe they will change how they do it. But the way that happens is because other people who are willing to share their views in public, they come out and say something, and maybe you haven't thought about it before, but now you're seeing your friends do it, and you're like, you know what? That person is someone I trust. They have a point, and I'm going to think about them when this issue comes up again. That is how this stuff starts to change. So, like, I don't care if someone's lurking, but if you have the benefit of saying publicly, sharing this stuff that you find helpful, or saying it in your own words, like, this is how I'm thinking about this stuff, just put it out there. You never know who's going to be listening. And I've said this to a lot of atheists too, who say, I want to have a YouTube channel, I want to have a blog, whatever, but I don't think anyone's going to listen. What I've always said, maybe you've done it too, is just go ahead and do it anyway, because you will be surprised at who ends up finding your stuff in a relatively short amount of time, because there's so many people who are out there looking for someone they connect with.
Yeah, I mean, I've had many sort of blog and column pieces where I've said, why do I do this? And then I get often people coming out of the woodwork saying, I'm a lurker, and I really do appreciate that. And you think, oh yeah. So I guess the reason I kept Derek Cruz's very kind super chat or super sticker up there, thank you so much for that, Derek, is I guess that Hemant is saying, go and get a bag of seeds and go and throw them liberally around, because do you know what? Some of them are going to find a place to germinate. I
cannot tell you how many people I personally follow on Twitter, which is my preferred mode of conversation, or blogging or something like that. And it's like, I don't know why I follow them, but I like that person. I'm intrigued by that person. And the more they talk about whatever their pet issue is, the more I feel like, yes, I feel the same way too. And like, I will never contact that person and say this is why it happened. But it's like, yeah, whatever you're thinking, it seeped into me. And now it's how I think about this stuff. And I appreciate that. There's so many people like that. But like, anyone could be that person. You don't have to start off with some following to make that happen. Just come out to the people you trust or put it on whatever platform you enjoy using. Like, I don't use TikTok, but man, there are so many people on there who know how to use it well and who end up building audiences who would never read our stuff or watch our videos or anything like that. Who cares? Go watch, connect with whoever you watch or connect with.
I know there are people who use it well because my 11-year-old son can't take his eyes off the bleeding
There
screen.
you go. Right.
So as we sort of draw towards a close, let's sort of mention Only Sky as being a way for you to do those things you've just been talking about.
Yeah.
And why it's still a necessary thing, and why it's taken so long for a non-religious media organization to even be started, where the demographics are going, why something I was going to mention earlier is the power churches and religions have politically is the fact that they have so much lobbying clout financially that atheist groups and lobbying groups just don't have. We don't have the money to be able to say, hey, we're here. How about considering us?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is getting crude, but it's like, I don't think anyone saw us as a business possibility. Atheist blogging has always been the sort of thing that is a nice hobby for people who do it. And Only Sky is really the first time anyone said, you know what, let's take this seriously enough, get investors involved. Let's show people we can make a business model, because there is a hunger for conversations about religion and atheism where we are not coming from a position of taking this stuff, taking religious beliefs as if they inherently deserve respect for being religious. Let's talk about it seriously. Let's create a platform where atheists can talk about the things that are about God. I mean, you're right. It has taken a long time for it to but I think if people haven't seen the site, by the way, you're going to end up finding like, oh, wow, there's so many things tangentially connected to religion, but that come from an atheist worldview. That's just like, you can enjoy the world. You can enjoy science and books and literature and poetry and whatever. There's all this stuff we can talk about that doesn't revolve around trying to disprove God. There's so much more where this comes from. And really, there hasn't been a really good, solid, big venture like this. Some attempts to try to make it happen, but they've always been like hobbies and side projects for the people involved.
The sheer range. I mean, I'm going down the page and it's still going because there's still just so much content on there. Obviously, you know, you've been long known for a lot of pieces on how you know, certain pastors are doing crazy things in churches and those kind of newsworthy things, and that's obviously still probably a lot of what you say. But you're saying you're doing slightly longer pieces as well. What how have you changed in what you're writing about?
I mean, it used to be, I feel like a lot of what I used to do is I just want to get this in front of you in case you haven't seen it. And now I kind of can try to write more about putting it in context for people who might not have any awareness of what's happening. So, for example, today, Ted Haggard was in the news because he was accused of doing some bad stuff. And I realized, like, well, Ted Haggard was in the news in like 2006. It's been a long time since that guy's been in the news. So not only do I want to explain what he's being accused of today, let's talk about why he was such a big deal many years ago, why this stuff might have an impact, why we should care about this story. And, you know, if I can take more time to do that, hopefully it'll be able to reach a lot of people who are not just atheists who don't like the guy, but a lot of people who might have no clue who he is at all. I mean, that's the sort of thing I appreciate being able to do, which is let me go in depth and tell you not just let me knock down a religious guy while he's down, but why this should matter to you.
I mean, I had high hopes of trying to interview all the writers at Only Sky, but that's when we started with about 20. There's now about 900
Yeah.
writers. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just a phenomenal, smorgasbord of writers. If you ever want to find, the writers on there, go to the About Us at the bottom and then click on, and you find the stuff that you need to find. So last chance to get any questions in, any super chats, hugely appreciated. So what do you think, what are you both worried about deeply at the moment in terms of atheism and politics and activism? What are you worried about most, but what are you also the most excited about?
I think I'm excited about the fact that it seems like something a lot of activists have been working toward for decades, which is normalizing being non-religious. That actually has happened in a lot of ways. Like, it's not everywhere, but like being an atheist is no longer as taboo as it used to be. And at least saying you're not religious doesn't carry the stigma that it used to. So that is a success. That's a long time in the making. Granted, like you mentioned earlier, it doesn't mean everyone's coming out as an atheist or non-religious, certainly not in Congress, but I feel like it's getting easier. We're going to get to that point. And actually, I do have a list. I posted about it earlier, like maybe a week or two ago. I am keeping track of all the non-religious candidates running for state or federal office. There are a lot. They have won their primaries. They are going to be on the ballot in November. That's a big deal. These are all people openly non-religious. In terms of what we still need to work on, I think one of the things all of us who are active in this movement still need to do is show people this is not just limited to a stereotypical atheist. Like, what does an atheist look like? I think by and large, the stereotype of an atheist is an older white academic male. Not because there's something wrong with that, but because that's kind of who comes to mind. And I think we need to do a better job of showing people like, no. There are black people, there are women, there are younger people. I mean, I think, was it today or yesterday, a new survey or a new analysis of survey data showed that among people like 25 or younger, maybe, or 20 or younger, women outnumber men when it comes to who's non-religious. That's never happened before.
That's a shift in data.
I mean, so that's the thing. It's like our demographics are shifting, but the popular image of what an atheist looks like and what that means in practice, it's not just some dude trying to dunk on God and wanting to debate you all the time. That is not necessarily what an atheist is these days in practice.
And this is the importance of representation, isn't it?
Yeah.
In talking about diversity, is like, for me sitting here as a white guy, and you think, oh, come on, really? Is this tokenism? Why do you? But no, it's super important, because actually, I'm not the target audience for a lot of the.
Yeah.
There needs to be people to represent this great variety of humanity that we have, so that if you're going to convince, it's kind of in-group, out-group psychology going on here. Like, I'm going to be far less likely to convince someone of my point of view if they are completely on an out-group to me. It's actually far more likely psychologically that someone in their in-group is going to convince them.
And how do we do that? I mean, one thing I would love to see that I haven't seen yet, I would love to see the media, by and large, reach out to more atheists when there are stories involving religion, which you would think, given all the religion stories, they would do more reaching out, but not just to the leaders of national groups, but they always go to the same handful of people. And I like those people. There's nothing wrong with those people, but there's so many more people they could be talking to. And I try to steer them in that direction when I can. I would love to see more representation. I mean, I've seen atheists on television in fictional shows, as a character, but they're usually one-dimensional characters or two-dimensional characters too. Like, you can have an atheist who isn't just here to trash God all the time. So it would be nice to see more representation in that light as well. But this is one of the cool things about Only Sky, where it's like, it's a site about atheism, for atheism, and the broader community of non-religious people. But as you showed when you're scrolling through the site, the bulk of the content has very little to do with trying to convince you why God doesn't exist. It's just like, that's a given. We're good with that. You can find that elsewhere. here's what we're doing with our lives, using that as a baseline. You know what I mean? And that's where it gets interesting, because
And
now
just see,
you're starting to see, at least in the US, second generation atheists, third generation atheists. That never happened before. We've always heard stories of people who grew up in religious homes, became atheists, and that's the story we hear. How many stories have you heard about people? My parents grew up without religion. I didn't go to church growing up, and I'm an atheist now. You never hear that story. So it is going to be interesting to see how this stuff seeps down 10, 20 years later.
yeah, because I mean, it's about playing the long game. And you were talking about this and saying, look at the list. I compiled a list of all the people running for Senate or House,
Yeah.
or like down ticket, and how many atheists or non-religious people they are, secular people there are. Yeah, well, imagine that 4 years from now. Imagine that
Right.
10 years. And I know it's a long time and it's moving so slowly.
Yeah.
But again, you know, I think the data supports the idea that the deconversion compared to conversion rates is mainly one way. It's like people are far more likely to deconvert from religion and stay deconverted.
Yep.
Than people are to convert to.
You
religion
do not
and
see a
stay
lot of
converted.
atheists becoming Catholics and staying there. It
Yeah.
happens, but rarely. Yeah.
Yeah. So you know, that's something to look forward to. So you're broadly what. So when I said what you're excited about, what you like a bit like, you know, scared about or whatever, you're saying that the move in demographics and the general normalization that is a very slow boiling
But
thing
it is
is
happening.
good. But
Yeah.
it is happening. So what then?
That stuff
Okay,
is-
what are you worried about?
Yeah. In terms of
and
what I'm scared about, that smaller, decreasing core of religious believers seems to have outsized
yeah,
power. And the rest of us, need to figure out a way to push back against that, whether that's voting, whether it's joining forces when it comes to big issues like the abortion ruling, things like that. I've seen it happening. It's very heartening to see when you see like American atheists work with the Baptist Joint Committee on Religious Freedom and saying like, yeah, they're religious and we're not, and we are in lockstep on this issue because we don't want the church dictating our laws or a specific belief in a specific brand of religion.
just to explain my kind of what I was doing there, I was pretending to be a fighting conservative backed against the wall. Then I wasn't just having a fit. So okay, I'm just going to go with my quick fire questions in a minute for you as a kind of ending thing. But before I do that, what excites you? What gets you up in the morning?
I'm excited about the fact that hopefully whatever I'm passionate about, that I'm writing about that day or something, I hope that connects with other people who maybe don't know me, who don't care about my views or anything like that. That is the thing that always excites me, that someone might come across my stuff that hasn't done it before and hopefully was like, well, yeah, that makes sense. In terms of professionally, that's the sort of thing that excites me. And I like doing that on different platforms. So like on YouTube, same thing. Like I go through the Bible or I'm making a video about something and maybe someone comes across it that knows nothing about me, but they watch that and they're like, well, I guess that makes sense. I mean, how could you argue against that? I like that.
Have you got your favorite? I know you've mentioned one or two already, and maybe that's yours. But have you got a favorite person that you've convinced out of their position? It can be politics, it can be anything, right? Have you got someone that you're like, oh, actually, that I still remember that, or that was really important, or does it happen so often?
It's not that it happens like every day or something, but I do keep in my like Gmail inbox a list of nice things people have said over the years. And a lot of times people will say like, I was listening to your podcast. I've been listening for a number of years. And at first it's because I was curious about this stuff. And now I find myself just appreciating the fact that someone is saying what I'm thinking now. And there are a number of variations on that sort of message. I've been lucky to get a number of them over the years. One specific, no, but it comes every so often and it doesn't go unnoticed. So I always appreciate when people reach out to say that sort of thing.
Okay, so the quick fire questions to end. You're not allowed to think about these.
Okay.
And can I just say thank you so much to the super chatters. Thank you to all the people who have listened into this and who will listen when it goes sort of non-live. thank you for your support. It really does mean a lot. And thank you for the new members to the channel. They are awesome. They've got special funky little icons next to their names, which means that they are definitely better human beings than everyone else.
Nice.
So quick fire questions. Let's go for the easy ones to begin with. Favorite non-fiction book?
Oh, non-fiction book. Oh my God. I'm trying to think. The most recent one I read was Cast by Isabel Wilkerson. Really interesting way of looking at racism in America.
Cast with an E on the end.
Yes.
Yeah. Good. By who? Isabel
Wilkerson.
I mentioned this the other day, so I've got it right next to me. But I don't usually tell people what my answer to these are. But The Anatomy of Violence by Adrian Raine is one of my favorite non-fiction books. Absolutely brilliant. That's why I've got loads of bits going on there. Anyway, so that's just random. Favorite fiction book? Maybe you don't get time to read anymore.
It's been a long time. Shawshank Redemption. I was gonna Count of Monte Cristo. I love that book.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So is that who wrote that? Was that
was Dumas?
No, Dumas. That's it. Yeah. Okay. Favorite TV series?
Survivor.
Okay. Is that the reality one of surviving in it? Yeah. Favorite movie?
That was Shawshank Redemption. Yeah.
All right.
Actually, you know what? I saw Parasite recently.
Still on my to watch list.
Blew my mind. It was amazing.
I really have to watch it. I mean, it won an Oscar.
I'm jealous that you haven't seen it because you'll get to watch it for the first time.
I love that reaction. Yeah, that's such a cool thing to say. So if you could wake up tomorrow and have a dream job, like it's a job that you really want, what job would you have?
This sounds weird. I feel like I'm doing it right now. It does change all the time in the sense of like sometimes, what's the main motivator, but like the fact that I can write about these things that I'm passionate or angry about, and I can try to make sense of it for people who don't have the time to research it or dig into it as much as I do. Like, I didn't dream of growing up to do that job. I still don't consider myself a writer per se, but the fact that I can do that, it seems pretty awesome. So I don't want to go back to doing anything else right now. Let's put it that way.
That's awesome. If you had $1 million that I gave you now, but like, by the way, I'm not going to give you $1 million now because
that's not how this ends.
No, sorry about that. But if I gave you $1 million now and you had to spend it in not on stuff, like where would you put $1 million now?
If it's selfish reasons, what I would love to do is get a little team of people who write about the sort of things I write about specifically, and like who can watch more sermons online. Like I do a lot of stuff by myself, and it would be really neat to have a little team of people doing the sort of thing I'm doing. In a way, only Sky is doing that, but like I don't control what you write. You know what I mean? But it's like, no, I want to cover more stuff. And sometimes it's like, well, I don't have time to do all 5 of these things. Let me pick one that I can just do a nice deep dive on and then focus on that. So it'd be really cool to be able to like hire a little staff to do this sort of stuff. And that same goes for like YouTube and things like that.
Yeah. Great answer. If you could throw that at someone else or another charity or like, I don't know, other institution.
You know what's interesting? I don't have an answer for where I would give the money because I would have to do more research on that. But there is a donor who has money, Todd Stiefel, who started a foundation years ago. And he's like, I want to promote a lot of these groups. I just found it interesting. He just gave, I think, a 6-figure grant to the religion news services, which is like a wire service for articles about religion. Specifically, he did it a while ago, and I think he did it again to cover non-religiosity.
Because they often have non-religious pieces on there, actually.
Yeah, specifically, I think if I have this right, several years ago, he gave like $100,000 to the organization and said, this is covering hiring a staffer for 2 years to cover the atheist movement. And I think he just gave a larger donation now and just said, I want you to focus on Christian nationalism. He doesn't dictate their coverage. He doesn't say you have to write about this or that. He's saying, listen, whether you hire someone to do it or do whatever, please focus on this subject because I think it's important, and it absolutely is. And then he leaves it to the experts to figure out how they want to make use of that. And I just find that a very useful, helpful thing because it's not about convincing us it's a threat. It's about making sure this gets out to as many people as possible. And not through him or his biases. He's saying you guys are professional journalists, but you can't cover everything because journalism is rough right now. So I'll give you money to whether it's hiring someone or paying someone to do this stuff. Send them to these rallies. Tell them to cover this stuff.
Story. That's so cool.
It's such an interesting way to do it.
I think I dream of doing stuff like that. Like I'd love to do things like that. Can I just say thanks so much to Chindi Chimbalu, who not only is one of my 4 members, legend, and is not an atheist, but is a really honest theist who often comes on to say, yeah, I do have a problem with that, but to be honest, faith gets me there, or whatever. But he's honest, brutally honest to say this is a problem and stuff. So I really appreciate everything Chindi says, and he's such a great supporter of the channel. Nothing to say, JP, just great. You brought the friendly atheist on your channel. I will let you atheist chat. Nice. And thank you so much. Thank you for that. I'll leave that up for a second, just as a big thanks. So last couple of sort of quick fire questions. If you last supper, you're just about to get executed for your atheism, obviously, because you know that it's only a hop, skip, and a jump in Gilead, the United States of Gilead. So you're going to get executed. So but you are given a last supper. What would you choose to have as your last meal?
I'm debating between like Thai food and Mexican food. Love them both. Pad Thai, enchiladas. I'm good.
But you just, I'm going to have them both. Sorry, I'm going to have a tray of enchiladas and.
I mean, what do I care if my stomach hurts afterwards?
Yeah, quite. Where would you go on holiday if you could now?
You know what? I just did that for the first time in a long time, where I just went somewhere by myself, and I went hiking in a national park in Washington State, and it was really nice. Just kind of walking around for days on end, and it was really cool. Just did it solo. It was cool.
Oh wow, that takes something to go to do a holiday alone, because you associate holiday with the enjoyment of other people.
I know. I'm very curmudgeonly. I will say I do have a family. We have gone places, but it's like, and that's all well and good. But our things are like, what will make the kids happy? Going by a pool or something. It's like, what do I want to do by myself? Let me put my phone away and just go somewhere far away from humans.
Oh wow, that's awesome. And one of the final questions is, you are just about to get your face eaten off by a zombie, and which is, rather unfortunate. But what is fortunate about the situation is you've got bunker. So you run down the bunker, but you take with you 3 people, dead or alive, but they aren't allowed to be your friends or family. So 3 people to take into the bunker to spend a month with before the zombies eat themselves.
Oh my God. I don't have names, but I will tell you, that's what I end up doing on Twitter, where I don't follow a lot of people and I don't follow all the atheists either. But the people I end up following on Twitter are people who I read everything they put out, because I don't know who they are. They don't know me. I just love hearing what they have to say about everything. And I follow them because they post all the time about whatever's on their mind, whether it's sports or telling me how, the right-wing insanity is out there, but in a way that I don't cover. Like, I just enjoy hearing what they have to say about stuff.
Am I right?
And every now and then, it gets really fun when everyone ends up talking about the exact same thing.
Am I right in saying that the 3 people you take are 3 random people on Twitter that you don't really know who they are?
I'm going to take my phone and just follow them on Twitter. That's what I'm doing. And I'll be by myself.
You're just... I'll accept that, because it's such a different answer.
It's what I did when I was hiking. It's what I did when I was hiking as well.
but I thought you said you put your phone away.
I tried. It didn't always work.
You were virtue signaling there. You were like, check me out. I went, and but actually
there was no one around me, but I did have my phone.
You sat on a rock and looked at Twitter for 3 days, and then came home and said, I did some amazing hiking.
And it was awesome.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Okay, very last question. You get the chance of seeing a band or a musician or a musical, whatever, who are dead or alive, but you've never seen before. Who would you get to go and see?
I will tell you the band I've been listening to lately is Fleet Foxes. Love them. But there are so many groups on my phone right now that I listen to in the car when I'm driving.
Choose one. They can be dead or alive that you're going to see.
Fleet. I want to see them. I can listen to them over and over. Yeah, it's one guy. If there's a backup, I don't even know, but like, just love their music.
Fleet Foxes. You should have him in court for like mislabeling, because it's just Fleet Fox.
It's one fox. Yeah.
Anyway, Hemant, what an absolute pleasure it's been. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on. It's really kind of you. Is there anything you want to say as a parting gift to humanity? I mean, you're going to die. But,
I know. No, listen, if anyone's interested in any of my stuff, go to Only Sky. You could find me on YouTube or Twitter, and hit me up on there.
Definitely, you should do it, all of you, and go and subscribe. Although, you know, he has not infinitely, but a large, not far larger audience than I ever will. But you should still go and do that. So, thank you, Hemant. It's been really great talking to you, and who knows, maybe again it will happen. But in the meantime, guys, thank you very much for your support. Thank you for the lively chat and whatnot over to the side. The side. And as I always say, question everything, particularly yourselves, especially in this kind of polarized world we live in. You know, try and question your own motivation for believing things and for thinking things, and try and think of the best ways of inviting people out of a polarized state into a place where we can all like discuss things openly, and I don't know, still try and convince them otherwise. Who knows, it may just be a pipe dream. But take care, everyone. Toodle pips, and thanks. Have a good rest of the week.
Bye.